Rachel Corrie arrived in Rafah, a small town on the southernmost edge of Gaza, along the border known by the IDF as Philadelphia Road, or the Pink Line. Rafah has long been the center of the Palestinian resistance, a resistance which has taken on many forms. While the majority here practice non-violent resistance, there are groups of masked militants who engage in guerrilla warfare and smuggle weapons in through tunnels from Egypt. The Israeli Defense Force says that the home demolitions are a way to find guerrilla hideouts and eliminate these tunnels. But for people like Dr. Nasrallah living in Rafah, who are never charged with a crime, but whose homes are destroyed, this is viewed as a form of illegal collective punishment. It has also become apparent that the goal of at least some of these home demolitions is to clear an area for construction of an iron and cement wall, a wall that the IDF views as a security measure, and the Palestinians view as another human rights violation. Rachel began documenting what she was witnessing in emails that she would send to friends and family back home.
I have been in Palestine for 2 weeks and 1 hour now, and I still have very few words to describe what I see. It is most difficult for me to think about what's going on here when I sit down to write back to the United States. I don't know if many of the children here have ever existed without tank shell holes in their walls and the towers of an occupying army surveying them constantly from the near horizons. I think, although I'm not entirely sure, that even the smallest of these children understand that life is not like this everywhere. Once you have seen the ocean and lived in a silent place where water is taken for granted and not stolen in the night by bulldozers, and once you have spent an evening when you haven't wondered if the walls of your home might suddenly fall inward, waking you from your sleep, and once you've met people who have never lost anyone, once you have experienced the reality of a world that isn't surrounded by murderous towers, tanks, armed settlements, and now a giant metal wall, I wonder if you can forgive the world for all the years of your childhood spent existing, just existing, in resistance to the constant stranglehold of the world's fourth largest military, backed by the world's only superpower, in its attempt to erase you from your home. That is something I wonder about these children.
She just worked endlessly, writing all the time. She talks about writing in every crack, every space, every time that she can find.
She was writing those emails to her mother, telling her about what was going on there, and hoping that maybe those emails would maybe make them get out into the rest of the world.
Today, as I walked on top of the rubble where homes once stood, Egyptian soldiers called to me from the other side of the border, "Go, go," because a tank was coming. And then waving and, "What's your name?" Something disturbing about this friendly curiosity. It reminded me of how much, to some degree, we are all kids curious about other kids. Egyptian kids shouting at strange women wandering into the path of tanks. Palestinian kids shot from the tanks when they peek out from behind walls to see what's going on. International kids standing in front of tanks with banners. Israeli kids in the tanks anonymously, occasionally shouting, and also occasionally waving. Many forced to be here, many just aggressive, shooting into the houses as we wander away.
Her emails were going to our family members. We were sending them out to family and friends, and she was sending them to other friends. And I remember asking my son, "What do you think about what you're reading?" And he said, "It's amazing because it's not a perspective that I usually see or get." And we saw our family's understanding of this situation expand and start expanding from the time Rachel was there.
We don't choose who we are. We don't choose where we're born. We don't choose our parents. We don't choose their politics. We don't choose our politics until that critical moment in our lives when we begin to ask, what kind of person do I want to be? What are my principles? What kind of world I want to be part of?
I'm witnessing this chronic, insidious genocide, and I'm really scared and questioning my fundamental belief in the goodness of human nature. This has to stop. I think it is a good idea for us all to drop everything and devote our lives to making this stop. I don't think it is an extremist thing to do anymore. I still really want to dance around to Pat Benatar and have boyfriends and make comics for my coworkers, but I also want this to stop. Disbelief and horror is what I feel. Disappointment. I am disappointed that this is the base reality of our world and that we, in fact, participate in it.
A tenth of the population of Rafah have lost their homes, according to Human Rights Watch. It was wholesale demolition of homes in this area. It was remarkable to see, as Rachel said, it is so hard to imagine without really being there, no matter how many films you see, no matter how many newspaper articles you read. It was a sea of rubble because of the homes that had been destroyed.
I am really scared for the people here. Yesterday, I watched a father lead his 2 tiny children, holding his hands, out into the sight of tanks and a sniper tower and bulldozers and jeeps because he thought his house was going to be exploded. I was really scared that they were all going to be shot, and I tried to stand between them and the tank. This happens every day.
All the houses in this neighborhood close to the border on the Gaza side of that had been destroyed, and this house was the next in line.
Because this house was facing right onto the border, Israeli soldiers would come by in vehicles and shoot into the walls of the house at night.
Coming here is one of the better things I've ever done. So when I sound crazy, or if the Israeli military should break with their racist tendency not to injure white people, please pin the reason squarely on the fact that I am in the midst of a genocide, which I am also indirectly supporting, and for which my government is largely responsible.
2 bulldozers and an armored personnel carrier were in operations out near this home that Rachel had stayed in. It was the home of 2 Palestinian brothers and their wives, and a total of 5 children between the 2 families. They were out there for several hours, and the International Solidarity Movement people were trying to keep them from destroying the buildings around there.
Please stop shooting, and I wish that you may learn to love your neighbors.
The ISM members would take a stand in front of a bulldozer, and they might kneel or sit on the ground to show that they weren't going to move, and the bulldozers would come up and then stop as the dirt got right to the ISM members' feet. And in a couple of instances, in a case of Will, he was rolled over into some concertina wire, that rolled wire, the military wire that you see, but when others shouted, then the bulldozers stopped. And with Alice, she was pushed up against a wall, but again, when people started shouting, the bulldozers stopped.
Stop! There are people behind you!
That afternoon, the bulldozers stopped and went away to the border. And then in a few minutes, they came back, and one of the bulldozers took a run pretty much straight at the house of the Nasrallahs, and Rachel would have known that that family was home. They were always home and in the house, and she took a stand in front of the house, but this time the bulldozer did not stop. It went over her.
She was at eye level with the driver of the bulldozer. She was up, her head and upper torso were actually above the blade of the bulldozer, so he could very clearly see that she was there, her in her orange fluorescent jacket that she was wearing. But instead of stopping at this point, he continued forward, which buried her legs.
And the bulldozer continued forward until her body would be under the cab, and then it backed up, they say, without lifting a scoop.
I just have an image of her as I last saw her before she was engulfed, just scrabbling, desperately trying to free herself and trying to get out of the way of the bulldozer.
Then actually Rachel was alive somehow. When her friends ran up to her, she said, "I think my back is broken."